and welcome to the second day of the Mega SCO, which is our 3-day community kickoff event. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality revenue leadership community. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. If you're not a member yet, you will be invited to join after the summit, and I really hope you will. Now, the Mega SCO and the summit would not be possible without some of these incredible partners who you see on this slide. So as we say, snaps, kudos, and claps to them for really helping us make this happen. They're not only sponsoring the summit, and this specific event, I should say, they're also sponsoring all 3 days of events and all of the incredible content you've been consuming and will be consuming today and tomorrow. So to learn more about them, feel free to click on the Booths tab at the top of this event page, and you can check out all the ungated, valuable resources that our sponsors have made available just for you all this week. So don't forget, we have another set of amazing events for you tomorrow, so make sure to click on the Agenda tab at the top of the page to see our full schedule. This week's summit is full of the latest do's and don'ts for your 2022 SKOs. Whether you are in sales, marketing, customer success, or product, we have some content for you. The session you are attending right now is our keynote, led by Spekit founder, the amazing Melanie Fellay. And after this is our final panel of the day, which is on how to become a CXO. Here is so a couple housekeeping notes before we dive into this. First, this event is being recorded, so you'll be able to access the recording and the key takeaways on the summit page of the MSP website following this event. Secondly, if you have a question, please put them in the Q&A function at the right. I'm not sure that Mel will have total amounts of time to do that because she has a ton of content today, but anything that you put in there, we'll try to answer after the event if we don't get to it today. So with that, let me introduce the woman I've been speaking to this entire time, our incredible keynote speaker. She's recently a Forbes 30 Under 30 recipient, proud mama of Rufus the Golden Doodle, and a rock star female entrepreneur. This is the CEO and co-founder of Spekit, Melanie Fellay. So Mel, please take it away.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining. I could not be more excited to be here today. And just let me know when you can see my screen so I can get going, Nora. All set? I'm going to assume yes. Awesome. So thank you all so much for joining today. I'm Melanie Fellay, CEO of Spekit, and really, really excited for the opportunity today to be here with all of you. And just a little bit of a warning, today's going to be a little bit different. You know, as I was thinking through the content, I'm really hoping that this inspires you to think a little bit bigger this year as we step into 2022, as I share some stories of my journey, both as a leader, as an enablement professional, and more. And so when I look back at starting Spekit, for me, it all really started with a simple problem. I was in enablement and revenue operations and was trying to answer a simple question, which was, how do I make sure that my team knows what they need to know, when and where they need to know it? Because at the time, everything felt instant in our world, right? This was 2018. We had Uber, we had Amazon, we had DoorDash. Anything I needed was available to me instantly. Yet when I started looking for a solution, I realized that at work, we were still using the same methods as over 30 years ago. What I mean by that is the PowerPoint, for example, which is still the number one training tool. In fact, I think it's something like 500 million people see a PowerPoint every day, is still the same approach. It's, hey, here's information that I'm sharing to you like this. Similarly, the learning management system was invented in the 1990s, and it was still a, hey, let me log in, let me take this course that's been assigned to me, and let me take this assessment. And while these technologies have had new features and innovation, and there's some phenomenal learning management systems out there today, they were still the same method. Now, for perspective, can you imagine still using these devices? It's pretty hard to imagine our life without our smartphone, without instant connectivity to absolutely anything we need. Yet these phones came out 13 and 16 years, respectively, after the PowerPoint and after the LMS. And so with that, I asked myself, well, why couldn't things feel more instant at work? Why couldn't things feel easy for me as an employee? Why couldn't things, when it came to my mastering my role, my onboarding happened naturally in my flow of work, whether I was in LinkedIn or Salesforce, you name it. In fact, why couldn't things be simple yet delightful for the employee? Spectacular. And that idea that sprung up 4 years ago is now very much a real company. This graph actually shows our revenue, which, by the way, if you are a founder on the call, or if you're in enablement or sales or revenue operations and recently joined an early stage startup, don't worry. This part here, which is very slow in the first couple of years, is totally normal, right? It's that path to product market fit. But it's been an absolute joy to be able to take this idea and really bring this product to life. And today we have over 130 employees. And I'm also very excited that this just happened to land. And I promise you, it really was a coincidence that we announced our 45 million Series B today, which frankly, a few years ago felt just so far out of reach. It's hard to describe. So thank you for any customers that are on a call, our community, our partners that have helped make that happen. And the reason why it's pretty exciting is, one, it was a big amount, but two, we actually just raised our Series A 8 months ago. And so it's just been such a wonderful journey over the last couple of years to see this product come to life. And for any of our customers, you know that it doesn't come without challenges, right? It's a technology. We're not perfect, but I promise you we're doing whatever we can to make it the best product possible and one that's truly loved by users. Now, when I reflect on what got us here, right? Because the title of the presentation, which by the way was set before I'd really thought through the content, is the secrets to scaling from C to Series A to Series B. And with that, I wish I had tactics and strategies and the specific order in which you should do things in order to go from A to B and beyond. But when I take a step back, I realize that yes, those things matter, and it's definitely important to, for example, hire a head of sales when you realize that you're not doing a very good job of managing your sales folks. Shout out to Ryan and Freddie, who were there from the start. But that said, any image that I had of what it would look like to start a company or to be on this journey is very, very different than what the reality I found. In fact, if you don't live in Silicon Valley, maybe you've watched the TV show or you've seen images, like this is probably your image of what it looks like to start a tech company, right? All the glamour and the cool ping pong tables and all that fun stuff. But at least for us, it was quite a different journey. In fact, both of us, nowadays you can raise relatively not easily, but you can fundraise without revenue. At the time, that wasn't the case. And we were also one of the few women in the space that were doing this. And so it was something completely new. I didn't have a playbook of other women that had gone before me. And so we ended up making quite a few personal sacrifices. The picture in the middle there is me moving to Denver, which is now where our HQ is, to live with my grandma for rent-free because I didn't take a salary for 18 months. This picture of Zari is one of our favorites, and I'm surprised she lets me show it publicly, that our engineers took of her because she and her ex-husband had to downgrade to a studio, and she had to take all of her stand-ups with our engineering team from her bathroom. But the good news is when we look back, we were in the good company, right? If you look at a lot of the big companies that now, really have changed the way that we operate in the world, they all had pretty humble beginnings as well. But with that, when I think back to, what is it that we had to develop in order to really grow in our leadership? There's a lot of different words that come to mind, right? To tell you that hard work isn't part of the process is just not true. I wish I could tell you that, hey, just work smart and make it happen. And there's definitely aspects of that. But the reality is it took a lot of hard work, took a lot of resilience. And if you want to learn a thing or two about resilience, head over to Zari, my co-founder's recent LinkedIn post where she shares her story of the last year of her losing her brother the day we closed our Series A, her separating from her husband after infidelity, and all of that within a 8-month period and still showing up for her team, right? Resilience is a muscle you build and you never know when you're going to need it. Coaching for me was a huge part of my journey, right? Finding mentors and process and execution. I mean, there's a million different aspects and different traits that have contributed to our journey and our success. And the reality is that those things were necessary because when I was starting this company, and frankly, I still feel some of this, there was a lot of fear because for me, I was I was always relatively successful academically, and work is really where I found my identity and my confidence. And so the idea of putting my name behind something, putting my career behind something and seeing it not work, seeing it fail was a massive, massive block for me, right? And frankly, when I looked around me, I didn't have a lot of visuals of what success looked like for someone like me. And so I lacked a lot of that confidence that was required to go out and pitch a vision that I was still not super clear on. And I had a lot of imposter syndrome, right? I didn't come from 20 years of learning design. I didn't have a master's in instructional design. I hadn't used every single LMS on the market. But the irony is now I'm able to look back, and hindsight is 2020, is that all these blocks that I was seen as really coming from more of a victim mindset are actually my superpowers. Because imposter syndrome, for example, where I felt uncomfortable, I didn't have a network, I didn't come from this deep domain expertise, I think actually lent itself really well to us building something innovative. Because to build an iconic, completely new way of doing things, we couldn't just build the next best feature and the next one up of that existing solution. We had to radically reimagine it and reverse engineer and really ask myself, like, how would I love to learn as an employee? But with that, there was a lot to overcome. And frankly, you can look at every stat out there. If you've worked at startups, if you've tried to start your own, these stats are very real, right? It's hard to get funding. And most of the time you can try your best and it'll still fail. And luckily, Zari and I actually saw that happen. We worked at a company that raised $60 million and ultimately failed because it struggled to find that real product market fit. And so having experienced all that really made me realize that, in order for us to really walk what was considered uncharted territory in many ways in B2B SaaS, right? Look around, there's not a lot of female CEOs. Like, thank goodness for Sandy at Skilljar and others, but there aren't many of us, right? And so it's almost impossible for us to not focus on all the reasons why not. And for me, really, the most important part was getting comfortable and learning to trust myself. And so what we're going to be talking about today are really the steps that I took over the last few years to really develop that trust in myself, get clarity on my vision, and really get clear on my leadership and how could I infuse that into our team. And so whether you're in sales enablement and you're helping infuse that into every new hire that joins, whether you're in revenue operations, whether you're a sales leader or coach or mentor or founder, right? We can all use feeling more connected to our vision and clarity. And the reality is it's 2022. So everything you know about what it's like to be in your role in the past is changed. In order to continue to elevate and to continue to break through new ceilings, you have to continuously invest in yourself and figure out, how do I become 1%, 2%, 3% better every single day? Because whether it's technology that's completely changed your role, whether it's the dynamics of the market, whether it's competitors entering your space, change is going to be constant. And so today we're going to talk about the things that will help you, I'm hoping, really think bigger, dream bigger, and step into the best version of yourself for your team, for yourself, for your family, and beyond in 2022. And with that, little plug here, just because I thought it was cool when our SDR shared that. But this quote that I really, really believe in is that when you're growing quickly as a company or your team, so if you're looking at your headcount and you're looking at how quickly your headcount is growing this year, if you're looking at your revenue goals and they're growing this year, right? Your growth in whatever role you're in has to exceed the growth rate of your company. And I fundamentally believe that. And so when you're looking at your goals next year, right, whether that's growing your revenue, growing your headcount, let's say by 30%, if you're in enablement, if you're growing your headcount by 30%, and so you're going to have more demands placed on your team, how can you get your onboarding to be 31% better? If you're a sales leader and your headcount is growing by 30%, how can you become a better manager, a better coach? How can you become a better leader for your team? If you're in revenue operations, right, and you're going to have that much more demands for efficiency, how can you make your workflows, your systems, your processes 31% more efficient, right? And that mindset, that whole idea of as demands grow, I grow, and I look at my practices growing, is what we're here to really unlock today. And for me, that really starts with what's called the infinite mindset. So think growth mindset, but think a little bit bigger. So the infinite mindset, I did not coin the term. I didn't come up with it. I won't pretend to. But I first heard of it via Simon Sinek. Some of you might know him for the book Start With Why. He's just an absolutely phenomenal writer and speaker. And he wrote this book called The Infinite Game. Now, The Infinite Game is really about breaking down in life. He breaks down the concept of there being two games. And the analogy he gives is football and business. In football, he says, in a finite game, there are known players. There are also known rules. And there are known objectives, right? There is always a winner and a loser. But in business, right, it's a completely different game. There are known and unknown players, right? There could be a competitor entering your market at any point in time. The rules are also changing. If you work in finance or regulated industry, you know that firsthand. And the goal is not to win. There is no concept of winning in business or winning in your role, right? The goal is to stay in the game as long as possible. And the example that he gives to illustrate this, which really resonated with me, is the whole story of Microsoft versus Apple. And he explained that, when Apple released the iPod at the time, it was like the newest, greatest technology that had ever hit the market. And Microsoft spent quite a bit of resources trying to catch up, and they launched their version of the iPod. Well, guess what? That same year, Apple launched the iPhone. And the big lesson here is that Microsoft was playing the catch-up game, right? They were just trying to outbeat Apple. But Apple was playing a game of its own, right? They had that infinite mindset where they were trying to outcompete themselves. They were trying to get better and better and better. And that is something that I've really, really taken to heart as we think about our landscape, right? Enablement and digital adoption and knowledge and learning. There are so many different kinds of competitors in the space, but how can I look at them as rivals? Wow, what they're doing is really working. How can we take inspiration? But at the end of the day, really focus on what do we want to deliver to the world? And how do we continue to be as innovative and outpace ourselves? And that mindset is a complete game changer when it comes to winning in business. And by the way, just quick hack, if you're like me and have a hard time making time for reading and a big podcast reader, the first time I actually heard of this concept was on Brene Brown's episode with Simon Sinek. And it's 45 minutes. It's excellent. At minute 10, he actually describes that comparison in a much more eloquent way, I'm sure, but definitely recommend listening to it. And so with that, let's talk about the process of stepping into the infinite mindset. And I'm going to break it down really in the 5 different steps that I've taken over the last few years that I think are applicable to any role that you're in. The first one is, actually, before I go in, I'm going to test something out here. We're going to see how it goes, but get your pens and paper out. If you have a journal, if you have a notepad, or even your notes on your computer, take them out because I'd love to actually have a little bit of active participation here. And so the first one we're going to focus on is getting clear on your vision. And for me, that was really the hardest part early on because I think it's more comfortable in life to think small, right? And if you set smaller goals, if you set smaller goals for yourself personally, in your life, professionally, it's easier to feel like you're winning and that you're beating. But what I've realized is the bigger you dream and the clearer you get on what your North Star is in that bigger vision, the more you can start taking those steps every single day towards it. And so when it comes to getting clear on your vision, I think the biggest question you really have to ask yourself is what do you actually care about, right? What is it that you want to leave behind for your team when they talk about you or they think about you as a manager, or those employees that joined and went through your onboarding program, right? What is it that you want to be known for? And so when I think about my vision, and frankly, this has taken me quite a bit of time to get clear on, and I'd say I feel more clear now than ever. But when I think about it, I really broke it down as what is the legacy that I want to leave, both as a product in the marketplace, as a company, and then also myself as a leader. And as a product, I want to be known for having built an iconic product that changed the way that people learn forever, right? That people look at and they're like, how did we used to do things? Oh, before Spekit. What was that old way of doing things, right? One of those products that we all know in our minds are the ones that completely changed, right? Can you imagine if we were still using the phone book instead of Zoom Info? Or if we were still sending one-off emails instead of outreach, right? Those are categorical companies that came out and radically changed the way that we think about a way of doing things. And the best analogy I gave that has come to mind, and I mentioned this in the video that some of you might have seen about our announcement today, but it's really Gmail and Slack, right? When people ask me, like, are you trying to replace the LMS? Are you trying to eliminate PowerPoints? Like, what is it that you guys are trying to do at Spekit? I give the analogy of what Slack did to email, right? Because for those of you that were around when Slack first came out, at our last company it was introduced, and we met it with a lot of resistance because we'd been all using email, and it was a real estate finance company. So people had been using email and spreadsheets for forever. And when Slack was introduced, we were like, why do we need Slack, right? We've got Google Chat, we've got our email, we're just fine. But all of a sudden, people started using it slowly but surely. There were a few early adopters. And quickly we realized, wait, channels are awesome. You can send GIFs and memes, and you can have quick DMs and quick conversations. And slowly but surely, more and more of our communication internally shifted from using email to using Slack. And now that we're remote, like, I can't even imagine at our current company not having Slack. Now, it's not to say that the email was eliminated forever, but it's saying that over time, more and more communication shifted to Slack because we realized how much more value it unlocked as a team. And I think Spekit is going to do something very similar to your traditional learning methods, right? The LMS, for example, where it's not saying, hey, the LMS needs to disappear forever, but it's more so there is a certain type of content that makes sense to have in a course-like format ingested at once at the very beginning. But as people start putting their playbooks and their knowledge in a just-in-time solution, and employees get used to accessing it when they need it in their flow of work, more and more of that content will eventually shift to this just-in-time learning in the flow of work, and less in that, one-time delivery mechanism that people don't go back to. And that's really the shift that I want to create from a product standpoint. Two, I want people to look at what we built and be like, they did that, and they did it different. Like, there's something about the culture of Spekit that inspires people to want to blend more of that masculine and feminine leadership in the workplace, right? That makes people want to show up as their true selves and have that warmth and invite, and really blend the, hey, let's deliver on our goals and results and operational excellence. And if I know there's some people on my team that are listening, like, they know that when we set goals and when they commit to something, I'm pretty serious about it. And I think it's important that we have really high standards and that we aim for that. And how can we create an environment where people feel safe and people can show up in a way that's really authentically themselves, and really blend those two together? And that, to me, is really critical for a number of reasons. But one of them is retention, right? And a quick story to illustrate that is that recently the CRO of one of our potential prospects, after seeing a demo, reached out to me. He was really excited about the solution. And then before we talked, he's like, hey, I just have a confession to make. Like, he had reached out. He was so impressed by our BDR Morgan and her approach that he reached out asking to interview her for an account executive role. Now, she had just moved from SDR to BDR, and she really is as special as he makes her out to be. But she turned him down, right? Because she was more excited about the growth and the investment we want to make in her here than leaving just for the purpose of salary. And now we are all living the Great Resignation. And so when you can build that muscle in your organization where people are staying because they know they're going to grow and become better versions of themselves, that's your culture. And that's what we want to create more of. And then finally, like, what is legacy for my leadership? Because it's one thing for me to have a lot of my identity in my work, but I need to figure out, like, how do I want people to think of me, my team, my direct reports, people in the community that might not know me directly. And I've realized that something that I'm growing more and more passionate about really is helping elevate feminine leadership, and really leaders everywhere. That starts with every leader showing up in their true authentic selves, because at the end of the day, I'll be damned if this is still the image that our daughters, right, when I have them, or your daughters, still grow up thinking of this as the image of what it looks like to be a female leader, right? Where you have to be masculine and rude and disliked to be successful. Right? That turns us away from wanting to lean in. But I think if we had more women in the workplace at leadership levels, I think more and more cultures would really embrace authenticity. And actually, my good friend Alex here, we met in a similar coaching program. One of the things that he taught me is, when you embrace your uniqueness as a leader and you allow yourself to be a little weird, you give your team permission to do so as well. And there's nothing better than being in an environment that really allows you to be your true self. And that's the kind of leadership that I want to emulate, which is authentic, right? Where I'm not just correcting the language that I use on LinkedIn because I'm afraid that it's going to feel a little bit too informal or young. That's how I communicate. That's who I am, right? If you join the company, that's how I'm going to operate. That's how you're going to communicate with me. And so with that, I went through this process and it's brought me a huge amount of clarity on my values, clarity on my vision. So we're going to do something a little bit unusual here. We're probably right around the halfway mark. And so take up that pen and paper that you had, and we're going to go write a couple questions down. So if you can see my screen here, the first one I want you to write down is, what is, as you think out to 2022, right? What is your vision for yourself and the influence you want to have and your leadership? The second question is, what is your vision for the culture that you want to build within your team or to influence every team member that joins the company if you're in more of a operations or enablement or support role? And then finally, like, what is your vision for what success looks like as a team, right? If you're in enablement, what would it look like to ramp people faster or to get feedback from new hires saying this is the best enablement program they've ever been part of? What would it look like to bring more joy and more excitement into what you're doing? So we're going to take just a quick 2 minutes here and pause. And I'm going to go off camera so that it's not awkward as you guys go ahead and just spend 2 minutes writing it down. All right, I wish we could keep going, but we've got more things to go through. But I hope that was a nice little break, if anything, if you did not get to write a few things down. But if you did, I encourage you guys to share in. And this is something that we've gotten in the practice of doing quite a bit as a culture, is when we have all hands or time together, how can we inject a little bit of reflection time in there and then share a little bit of that connection with each other? And the reality is, if you're struggling to connect right now on impulse to what your vision is for yourself, you're not alone, right? One thing that I've learned is that to get really clear on your vision, and it's one of the best investments you will ever make for yourself, it requires both patience, but it also requires practice. And so next we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to step into that vision. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to the music, I've actually got my go-to vision clarity playlist. So I'll make sure to follow up with that as well in a bunch of takeaways with all the resources I'm sharing. And so with that, make space. I really got into vision work and getting clear on that with group coaching. So there's a lot of masterminds and coaching groups out there that can be really helpful. We've actually gotten so much value out of it that we have coaching for all of our account executives as well as our leadership team, which really helps create more connection as a group. But I've also realized that, unfortunately, connecting to vision isn't something that you can just do on command, right? You can't go from working 9-10 hours or however long you're working all day long for meetings and then be like, you know what, I'm going to sit down and write my vision for myself. It's hard. What I've realized is you really need to have the right energy going in how you prepare for it. You really need to have a conducive environment. For me, nature and music is really helpful with kind of getting in that mindset. And frankly, quiet time. Like, you need to make time for yourself. And frankly, I think one of the biggest realizations I've had as a leader is that I was always like, I didn't even know how to be alone before starting this company. I like any free minute that I had, I lived in San Francisco, I would fill, right? Whether it was meeting with customers or friends or family or coworkers, I was always busy, always filling my time up or having a constant to-do list at work. But I realized that learning to spend time alone and really in reflection is one of the best investments you can make in your growth, because it forces you to actually address those times that you didn't show up the way you wanted to for your team, that you were shorter, right? We're all human. I know there's a lot of things that I've said in reaction that weren't necessarily how I wanted to show up for the team, but being aware of that and making the time to reflect is super, super important. And just to put this in context, so I mentioned we raised our Series B, which for me and as a CEO and founder, that's arguably part of the hardest work you do. And it was something that I was really anxious about because our Series A was hard. I know some people like fundraising. I'd much prefer being internally operating than going out and pitching our story 25 times. It's intimidating, right? It feels like you're on the defense stand, but you're trying to defend your view of the world, your vision, yourself as a leader. And so rejection is hard. And our Series A was just at we only had 30 people at the time of the company. And so I was still doing a million things. My co-founder was going through an incredibly tough time. And so I ended up doing most of it myself. And it took basically 6 weeks to write the PowerPoint because I was trying to do it, 30 minutes every night after work. And then it took me another 6 weeks to raise. And so all that to say, I was not looking forward to fundraising our B. And one of our investors, Dan Scheinman, who's been a phenomenal mentor to me, right after we closed out our Q3, so again, only 7 or so months after A, he's like, Mel, when are you going to raise? I'm like, I don't know, maybe in Q1, maybe in Q2. And he's like, no, your time to raise is now. You guys have the numbers. You've got the confidence. You've got the team. You're building out your team. He's like, go raise now. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. And he's like, you know what? Do whatever it takes. But this weekend, go write a $50 billion vision. As if, by the way, that's a normal thing for anyone to have to go do. And I was like, well, I already have plans this weekend. In fact, I had plans to go to a music concert. I ended up going to deadmau5, which I'm sure Ryan is laughing on the other side of the screen because that's the way I first met him. But I had planned to go to deadmau5. I try and go to a music show or concert every few months because it's one of the places that I'm able to completely disconnect and focus. And I didn't want to cancel that in order to go do work. And I knew that actually, if I actually released the stress that I'd been having and did that first, I'd go in with the right energy. And so I went to deadmau5 and then I rented a little cabin up in the woods, just an hour outside of Denver, just me and my dog. And that weekend, I decided, I was like, all right, let me sit down, pen and paper. Let me do this. I had my playlist in the background and all that to say, I kind of followed that process that I realized, which requires, how do I prepare? How do I make space? And then how do I get in the right zone? And, compared to our Series A, I literally wrote our vision in 45 minutes. I created the deck the next day, sent it to our investors. They're like, yep. And within a week, we got in our term sheet with a very competitive round. And I think the lesson for me there was, I think it's natural for us to kind of resist doing some of that harder work that requires that focus time. But the more you start looking at it as a fun process and you do the things around it that make it a funner process, right? Like financial planning and all those things we're all doing, right? And the more you infuse that into how your team looks at doing their hard work, you're able to make any one of these processes a lot more fun. And so we won't have time to go back to reflection, but I urge you to really take a little bit of time today, after this, if you have a few minutes, just reflect on what environment really helps you connect more to, your vision? What's an environment where you feel like really infused, whether that's, going for a hike, whether that's going, for a walk downtown New York City, whatever it is, like find that time that helps you reflect and helps you really connect to it, because I think it's really important to know what that is, or what music helps you as well. And so with that, once you're clear on your vision, once you feel like you've made space to really do it, the third thing I've realized is like there is no shortcut. Like you have to master your craft. And as a founder, that was really intimidating for me, right? Because I needed to know just enough about all these different functions to know how to ask the right questions. Because I knew that I needed to hire people that were way smarter than I am in any given function. And I think I have. I know I have for that matter. But I need to be able to trust and verify. And what I mean by that is I need to be able to ask the right questions. And for that, I needed to feel confident in my ability to know just enough to do that. And whether you just took on a role that's bigger than any role you've ever had in the past, whether the team you're about to lead is bigger than any team you've ever led, there's always space to master your craft, right? Again, going back to that growth mindset, what you were doing last year isn't going to get you through this year. So mastering your craft is one of the things that I think is really critical. And my coach once said, you really need to adopt that beginner's mindset at everything that you do, right? And this quote has always really resonated with me around, how do you look at any problem there is from a beginner's mind? And with that, the first thing I did was really study greatness, right? And what I've realized is I just get bored, to be completely honest with you guys, of reading 30 CEO books a year. In fact, I don't even read them because I don't have the patience. I listen to them at like 2x speed on audiobook. But what I found is that, there's a lot of documentaries and more that are really about like what it takes to be great and what it takes to be excellent, right? One of the last books I read before starting the company, Mark Benioff, is Behind the Cloud by Mark Benioff, is one of the best books that I've read, mostly because it changed my view on like what it was to launch a software company. Because if you read the story of Salesforce, it was very much less about the software, but more about how they went to market and the movement and the brand they created around it that allowed them to have the time to really get Salesforce to where it is today, and the leadership lessons alongside that. With the Pixar story, it's all about creativity, right? At the time, what Pixar did was absolutely innovative, right? They were trying to blend computer science with imagery in a way that had never been done before. And when you watch that story and you see the amount of creativity and innovation that was happening, I mean, it's contagious, right? Like, how do we infuse that into our culture? The Playbook is a really cool series on Netflix because it studies basically the best coaches of all time. This woman is the coach that helped lead the U.S. women's national soccer team through all the championships that they won in Olympic Games. And there's like Serena Williams coach. And so you see these coaches and how they push their team to be great. And so one of the things I learned is that like by studying what other people do, not just in your field, but in completely different fields, you're able to take inspiration that apply from all different places. And I think many sales leaders recognize that, hiring athletes is typically really good because they've got that competitive nature in them. They want to be pushed. They want to be coached. And so, I think learning to kind of make time for these things is super, super important. And again, if you're short on time, there's a few podcasts that I recommend. The School of Greatness is literally a podcast about greatness, and it goes from like actors to psychologists to just everything in between. And it literally examines what it takes to be great in any given period. And a bunch of these podcasts, these are just the ones that I've been into over the last couple of years, but there's a million different forms of content out there. But again, these are all about talking about, what's happening in the world, and you're learning from the minds of great folks like the All In podcast. David Sachs is actually one of the investors in Kraft. Actually, he was the founding partner of Kraft Ventures, which is investing in us. And it's a great one if you're trying to stay up to speed on everything happening in Silicon Valley. But in reality, one thing that I've learned is that there isn't any real shortcut when it comes to developing expertise. Like, you just have to ask other experts around you. And so I can't emphasize enough. Like, I know growing up, like, people are like, oh, do you have a mentor? Do you have a mentor? And frankly, I didn't have one really until now. Like, I had a lot of people that provided guidance along the way, but I feel like now I've really got set mentors, and it wasn't, hey, become my mentor, please. It kind of developed over time, but they developed because I would reach out and ask a question. Like, a simple example is David Politis. He's the CEO of Better Cloud. And I never thought that I would consider him a mentor when we first connected. But when we talked, he gave me one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, which was, hey, and this was right after we'd closed our seed round. He's like, hey, if you want to go raise your Series A, make it your one and only job to have a list of 30 customers that are so unbelievably happy with your product that you can just put that in the diligence room rather than the 2 references that most founders give. And that's what I made it our job. I was like, on the CS side, on the product side, on the sales side, our job is to make sure that by the end of, when we're ready to go fundraise, we have 30 happy customers. And I do it constantly, right? We're in the middle of financial planning and I've got now $45 million, which is exciting, but I also want to make sure that I'm being a good steward of that capital and making the right investments. And so I reached out to the CFO of Clue, and all sorts of different people in my network to get their guidance to make sure that I'm really understanding and I'm double checking. We're about to launch ABM, so I reached out to Lars Nilsson, and he was able to give me some guidance on that. He built the entire ABM program at Snowflake, or leads it, right? And so the whole idea is like when you're trying to figure something out and you just don't know, don't make a mistake that was avoidable. Ask for help. And single-handedly, I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned. And guess what? You're in luck because you're literally sitting on a gold mine here, right? Modern Sales Pros luckily just started to exist when I started, which is how I got a lot of those connections. But like, we're literally in a gold mine of 25,000 people that are in our broad general space that are experts in different areas of the business. You don't have to figure it out alone, right? And so my question for you is, if you think about if you think about your own craft though, like what are a couple things that you can reach out to your community about and just get more support on? And by the way, the same applies internally, right? When I was leading an SDR team, I had no clue how to train SDRs. And frankly, like I didn't have the time to. And so I reached out to Morgan and my friend Clay, who are sales leaders, SDR leaders. I was like, hey, do you guys mind coming in and doing a couple sessions? And I ended up paying for some of them because I think it was worth it. But the point is, I think it's a really fun way that if you don't know how to train someone, or if you feel like that account executive for your team is not responding to you saying the same thing over and over again, ask one of your friends that's in that same position to come in and talk about discovery or to talk about how to handle competitors, right? Bring that new energy in and help diffuse. And so with that, I just encourage you guys, as you think about this year, right, regardless of the role you're in, the way you're going to continue to stay ahead is by continuing to master your craft. And so I just urge you to think about, one, how much time, when you look at the next month or two in your calendar, or even if you reflect in the last 3 weeks, were actually spent continuing to master your craft and learn new things, right? One of the things I try and do is take 3 product demos a quarter, just so that I'm staying on top. And that's the biz ops part of me, but I want to make sure that I'm staying on top of the new technologies on the market, right? Because at the end of the day, if your competitor is using the latest technology and you're using a technology that's 5-6 years outdated, who do we think is going to get more results from their activity, right? And so I think it's really important to stay ahead, master your craft. And I really encourage you, a simple process is like, what are 3 things that you've been wanting to learn more about? One of them for me was ABM that you haven't made the time to, and just write those down. Right? 3 things that you think you could get better at this year, that you want to learn more about, whether it applies today or tomorrow, and start finding those people that are going to do a coffee chat with you. I guarantee you they will say yes. And so with that, once you've spent the time actually mastering your craft, now it's time to start infusing that into your culture. And to me, there's nothing more important than making sure that you're infusing that energy and that mindset into how you operate. So this woman here is my co-founder. She is absolutely amazing. If you're looking to get any sort of inspiration around what it looks like to be resilient, I encourage you to go to her LinkedIn today and look at her recent post where she talks about her last year. It's nothing short but admirable. But I remember when we were first getting started as a company, I think it was actually when we were writing our founders agreement, she wrote down, or she said the words, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, come to know, wasn't actually her quote, but I heard it and it made sense, but it didn't really click with me until March 2020, right? Because any strategy, any plan, any tactic, anything that you had in store for 2020 went out the window. The only thing that remained was the resilience of your people and your culture. And that is why for us, it is so important to continuously invest in developing our people and creating a culture that allows our team to show up in a way that, we feel like they're continuing to grow both personally and professionally. And so when it comes to culture, right, forget this. Forget all the cool swag. Actually, this is like the first year that we've invested in cool swag other than our octopus in the past. Our sales team, especially our early employees, were like, can we please get a Spekit t-shirt? But I didn't want to waste money on that, right? I wanted to focus on investing in them instead. But forget all the things that come with culture. I really think that your culture is the energy of your team and the environment that you've created to support that energy. And for us at Spekit, we just met with our leadership team. We did kind of a guided leadership retreat in December as we were closing out the year, and came up with a theme. We really want to win and learn as a team, not win and lose, but how do we make sure that with every mistake we do, we learn a lesson, right? And it's a blameless retro, and create really this sea of safety. We're very ocean themed here. If you didn't know, our mascot was an octopus, but the whole idea is like, how do we create an environment where people feel empowered and can also, show up in a way that, they can be vulnerable if they need to, right? If they're about to miss a goal, that they feel comfortable bringing it up sooner than later. And so on and so forth. And what I've realized is, number one, communication fuels energy. So there's different ways that remote you can set this up, right? But we have a wins channel where it's not just about, posting like, hey, we won this customer. It's they go through and actually spell out like, how did we get the customer? What did we have to overcome? What did they love about us? Who are all the different people? Because it's often a team effort when it comes to winning a sale, right? At least at a startup, we involve like our product team sometimes and like our support teams and our success teams, right? It's rarely that AE alone. And so we've encouraged that. And it's one of the happiest channels that we have. You're Spectacular is another one where you give shout outs to different people on the team. We also really take our Monday morning all hands. We do them bi-weekly really seriously. And for me, there's times to communicate lessons and learnings. And to me, that's much better communicated via email, which I'll speak to. And there's times to just bring energy and motivation. And for me, that's what our Monday morning all hands are for. And for that, I get feedback all the time from our team that they actually like them. And I remember our all hands at my last company that we had every Monday morning, like they were fine, like they were informative. We learned about all the things, but I didn't look forward to them. But I think if you ask most team members, they'd say that, we try and make them unique. And the whole goal is to like create connection, to energize, and ultimately to drive alignment when there's important communications. But the one piece that I like is the element of surprise, right? I love surprises. And so I always try and infuse just a little bit of surprise into it. So sometimes it's starting off with taking a deep breath or having a reflection question where then people share, right? Sometimes it's bringing in surprise guests. John Barrows was kind enough to jump in yesterday and talk to the team. One idea I had when I was on the road and missing my own family was to, it was in September, it was at SaaStr, the year was coming to an end. It felt like we'd been running nonstop. And I was like, okay, before we do anything more, it was like all 100 of us went off camera and had 5 minutes to go call that person that they'd been meaning to, that friend, that family member, whoever it was in their life that they had to make time for. And they had 5 minutes to call them. I called my grandpa, and we all came back on the call, and just the energy that was there, like everyone had called that person in their life they were so excited about. And then people shared, and just you learned stories. I mean, it was just magical, right? And like those kinds of moments are the ones that create your culture. They're the ones that help you drive forward when you create connection with your team. And the ones that bring more purpose to you showing up Monday morning and not having Sunday scaries, right? We've also encouraged people to write thank you cards. Like, hey, think of someone in your life. It can be personal, it can be professional, that you want to thank and really express gratitude towards for being there for you or helping you grow. So anyway, so we do all sorts of different things, but that's a great way of doing it. I think it's also important to connect to your vision. So I haven't even shared this with our executive team yet, but for our VPs and above, we're actually going to start encouraging them to take an afternoon or a day off every quarter by giving them a $250, a $250, basically gift card that they can go spend on a night somewhere to just take that time to reflect. We did Summer Fridays this summer, right? We give everyone their birthday off because that's like the one day a year you get to celebrate yourself and your family and reflect on your life and reflect on, how much progress you've made as a human. And so, we try and inject like these things in your culture that like really just communicate like, hey, like we are going to hold you to a really high standard when it comes to your role and your job and executing and delivering, because that is how we continue to be able to offer you that role And like, we recognize that you're a human and that we are all trying to figure out how to make the most of this physical time on earth. And so therefore we want to make sure that you have an environment that allows you to grow and that supports your growth. And I think there's no other way to do that than by actually living by those values. And so with that, I encourage you, as you think about this year, as you think about, the way that you lead your, Monday morning, if you're a sales manager, SDR manager, and you think about how you lead your team meetings, right? What are a few things you can start trying to infuse that energy, right? That motivation into your team. One of the easiest things is truly reflection time, where it's just like, hey, we're going to take the first 5 minutes, again, put on a good song in the background and have people reflect on, and it can be anything. You can start a little bit more casual, and then you can ask a little bit more thought-provoking questions. But I can tell you that when you give people permission to connect to their vision, you get a lot more out of them. And you start breaking down the wall. When you see someone share their vision, their goals for themselves, and why they're motivated to run through a wall in their life, and you're able to foster and cultivate that energy, that's how you drive results. It's not by deploying the latest tactic on how to prospect or all those other things that we spend so much time optimizing. It's by helping make sure that the talent that we have feels fully developed and trusted and empowered to go run through walls. And so with that, and we're approaching the end here, but the last piece is also sharing learnings, right? Because at the end of the day, a big piece of like fueling that energy and motivation is also recognizing that, we're all going to trip and fall sometimes, right? And making it clear that it's okay to make mistakes as long as you're learning from them, and making sure that we pause and take the time for that. And one of the things, this is just a quote that I love as well, from Henry Ford. If you guys can't tell, I like inspirational quotes. But one of the simplest ways of doing that is retros. And a retro is something that's very common in the engineering world, right? So if there's ever a big bug that gets released into production, or if a major deadline is missed, right? You get your entire engineering and product and QA team together, and they do a retro, and they go through like, what are all the steps that took place, and where did we make mistakes, and what processes didn't happen, et cetera. And it builds that muscle of looking to improve and that continuous growth mindset. And, I frankly don't do it enough, but it's an area that I'm really focused on this year, is like, how do we do more of that? And how do we inject more of that reflection? And so, as a technology company, unfortunately, bugs are inevitable. We are going to try as goddamn hard as we can. And sometimes there's going to be something that happens. And anyone that works for a tech startup knows that, but there is nothing that pains me more as a founder than having a product that isn't absolutely perfect that's out there. And I promise you that is something that we try and hold ourselves to the highest standards. But this time last March, so a little bit over a year ago, right when Zari was out because her little brother had passed away, we launched a feature. It was our flows feature, and it was premature for the market. We should have launched it as a beta. It was a massive learning for us. But I did a big retrospection as a company, right? And I tried to inject a little bit of humor. I took our mascot and put little band-aids and bugs, right? But the point is, I sent a long email, and I sent it to the entire company because I wanted all of us to realize that, it's okay that we made this mistake, but how are we now going to do right by our customers? How are we going to use this moving forward and incorporate that into how we do releases, right? And when I say it's okay, it was still a huge amount of shame that we carried, right, as a team, because it was disappointing. But we move forward, right? And I looked for ways to do that. And I can tell you that these are the emails that people remember. This is what fuels your desire to go and do better and to grow and to learn. And we are better for it. I also encourage radical candor and feedback, right? And so I don't think I can grow in my leadership if people aren't giving me feedback. And guess what? What no one tells you is, as you grow in your leadership, you get less and less feedback. People don't like managing up. But if you are listening on this call and you have a manager, I encourage you, give them real feedback. And one of our leaders recently wrote us, and he wrote, "Candidly, you swoop and poop," which we had to Google. But it's a management style where you come in last minute on a big project and you basically blow everything up. And I knew exactly the instance that he was referring to, and what he said, it impacts them and impacts the culture. And that's something that, again, I might have learned that after the 10th time of doing it myself and observing everyone's reactions. But how much better was it for me to hear that feedback and be able to really reflect on that and harness that and figure out, like, what are the reasons? Why am I doing that? Right? I feel like I don't have the right visibility. I feel like I'm not in the right meetings, right? And so I was able to instead take that feedback and figure out like what are the reasons that I feel the need to do that, and how can I ensure that I adjust my process and things to avoid that, right? And again, if you're in a management role or if you have a manager, like building that muscle of feedback within your organization is the gift that will keep on giving, and that much I know. And if you don't have an easy way of getting it, right? I just launched this for the first time this year, but I sent to our broader leadership team an annual survey. I created, questions that I was just genuinely curious, like, hey, where do you think my involvement is the most helpful in your role? Where do you think it's least helpful, right? What are the top of mind issues for you about the business that you think I should be focusing on? And I made it anonymous so that, people could really feel free. But I told them, I was like, please spend the time on this. And I got really thoughtful responses. And, in reflecting back, I realized like, wow, like when I was running our onboarding programs and enablement, I would ask for like feedback, but not in the form of like actual thought out, surveys. When I was managing a team, I would ask for like, okay, give me feedback, right? And people use 15.5 and they give you the quick, like, oh, you did this one thing off. And that's great. But real feedback is really important. And I think if you find a mechanism by which you're able to get that, like you will continue to grow. And that is how you start making leaps and bounds in your growth as a leader. And so with that, it's 2022, right? I shared a lot of different things that hopefully will inspire you to think bigger and dream bigger. But it's time that you really step into that infinite mindset, whether you're in mid planning for next year because your fiscal quarter ends here, whether your year just started, right? This is the year to think bigger. And hopefully this content today gave you a little bit of inspiration and different tools and strategies that you can apply. So with that, thank you so much for listening in. I do see that I've got 4 minutes to go. So if there are any questions that I can help answer, please go ahead.
Well, I think, Mel, there was a question in the Q&A from Alan Newton that was saying, how long before you first raised did you begin building an investor community, and how did you find the best way to connect and build those relationships?
Great question. Not much, because frankly, because we'd kind of seen the, so at my last company, like we'd kind of seen the darker side of VC that people allude to. Zara and I were afraid. So we actually did like friends and family. We had like former kind of colleagues invest, and we kind of did your kind of angel investing round. And then we were starting to get ready. And I actually reached out to folks on Twitter. So I like found Dan Scheinman, reached out to him on Twitter. We got connected to Brett, who's our current investor, Brett Queener, via another company. And so frankly, I had no network in VC, and I didn't really do a good job of building it initially. But this time around is different. So for our Series A, even though we actually got a term sheet pretty early on in the process, our investors encouraged me. They're like, still go pitch to every single person that'll listen to you. It was like kind of in our short list of 20 or so companies, because that way you're starting to build that network, even if you're not the right fit for them right now. And so I got in the practice of going out there and pitching to these different investors, which meant for our Series B, when I said, hey, by the way, I'm kicking out this process, do you want to chat? They were like, yes, let's connect. Right. And actually Craft Ventures and Felicis Ventures both passed on our A for what it's worth. And both were leading our B this time. So again, I think it's just a matter of realizing that like, every bat isn't necessarily going to be the right one, but the more you kind of get that practice and get going, just like in sales, the more conversations, the more you prospect, the more pipeline you have, the better at bats you'll have.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melanie. This was absolutely incredible. I feel really inspired and excited. And I'm, again, like we said, this will be up on our website, so you can check out the landing page for the Mega SCO and rewatch this. And I know I'm going to be rewatching it once I find that playlist, so I can continue to be inspired myself.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone who has joined, thank you also for joining. This was probably one of the best keynotes I think we've ever had. Up next,
and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn too. And if you guys have any follow-up questions or anything else, like feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to share them.
Awesome. Thank you again, Mel. And thanks to everyone who joined. Hopefully you will all join us for our next event, which is, so you want to be a CXO. If you haven't registered yet, we're dropping the link in the chat right now. So you can go and sign up. Here you go. And if you have registered, you should have a personal link in your calendar invite already. And yeah, so fabulous. Thank you again. Bye, everyone.
Awesome. And I'll send a recap of all the books and playlists and podcasts and all that stuff as well, in case any of you guys are curious.
Yes, so keep an eye on your inbox.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Bye, guys. Bye-bye.